Thank you very much, Hugh. Next, an exclusive interview with a woman who was sexually abused as a child every day for 6 years from the age of 8, and then chose to meet and forgive her abuser in a restorative justice programme. Laura Coel, who's a mum of 2 from Morpeth in Northumberland, has chosen to waive her right to anonymity to tell us why she wanted to meet her stepfather face to face so she could talk to him about the impact the abuse had on her life. We believe she is the first child sex abuse victim in a domestic situation to talk publicly about her story in this kind of detail. Laura, welcome to the programme. Thank you very much for talking to us. John Collins is also here. John is the Chief Executive Officer of the Restorative Justice Council. Your mum, Laura, moved in with your stepfather when you were about 4,
When I was 4, yeah, that's right.
And he began to groom you.
Yes, he did. I didn't know at the time, obviously, that's what was happening, but now I can see that there were certain things where I was being manipulated and treated differently to my sisters and brother in a way that was making me more to get my trust.
Right. So what sort of things, what kind of examples could you give us?
Just treating me like telling me I was special, and I was, but then other ways telling me things like, if I misbehaved, kind of keeping a secret, we'll have this as our secret, we'll not tell anyone, and just ways of gaining my trust.
When did the abuse begin?
My first memory, I know I was 8, and that went on until I was 14.
And how often would that happen?
It would be a continuous thing, really. It was like a daily thing. It was something that just happened all the time in the house. Or wherever we were alone together,
right.
wherever we were.
And even when others were there, or in the garden, or in the car, or?
Yeah, it's obviously just progressed as the years went on, and there got to be more and more instances where I was being abused when there were other people either in the house or in the next room, or I would be abused like in the car. We had an allotment we would often go to and things like that, where there were often other people around, but obviously my stepdad would take me to like a private area, like a shed or something, and so that was happening more and more often, yeah.
Did you know it was wrong, or had he groomed you to such an extent that you thought this was what sometimes happened?
I think as a child I knew it was wrong, and I felt incredibly guilty about it. Yeah.
Age 14, the abuse suddenly stopped. But that was when the horrendous physical effects of all those years of being abused began to manifest themselves. Give us a little insight into that.
Yeah, well, when I was 14 and the abuse stopped, I kind of blanked it all from my mind for a while, and in order to block it out, it kind of took over mental health, really. I developed eating disorders, bulimia, and that led into anorexia. There was self-harm and laxative abuse. And then as I got older, drink and drug abuse, anything I could do to try and stop me from eating, basically, to try and to lose weight, which the eating disorder was just a way of me covering up what was really wrong.
And at this time, most of the time, you were actually still living at home under the same roof with your mum, obviously, and with this man.
Yeah.
Did your mum not wonder why you were going through bulimia and anorexia? How was he reacting to all this? I
think people just thought I was a bit of a drama queen, really. A lot of people do think that eating disorders are just a stage that some teenagers go through. But I was actually trying to cope. It was a coping strategy for trying to deal with this incredible guilt that I had and that I carried from being a small child.
Eventually you did go to the police.
I did eventually, yes.
And he was charged, he pleaded guilty, he was sentenced, he was given a 10-year sentence that was reduced to 8 years on appeal. He served 4. But after a year in jail, you wrote to him. Why did you do that?
I found that I still had lots of unfinished business and loose ends to tie up, and just questions that I couldn't answer, no one else could answer, and I really needed to know the answers to. So I wrote to him. I don't know. As well, it's difficult, I think, with our relationship because it was like a father and daughter relationship. It wasn't like he was just a random attacker. I don't know. I just needed to speak to him.
Yeah.
But I couldn't.
You weren't ready to speak to him actually, but
No.
I think a victim liaison officer had seen your letter and suggested that there might be a way of perhaps meeting him.
Yeah,
but you weren't ready
he wasn't allowed to respond, so he would hand that on to his into the prison. But and then I was contacted to say there is actually a way you can do this correctly.
But it wasn't until 2014 that you actually felt ready to do that.
We talked about it back then, but I got pregnant, and so it wasn't right to go into prison. You know, in a delicate state.
Absolutely. I think our audience won't know that much about these restorative justice programmes and the kind of preparation that goes into, you know, before a meeting like this is quite astonishing.
It's really
it took 11
intense,
months for a start, but give us some insight.
Well, I had many meetings in face, on the phone, through my victim liaison officer and the restorative justice facilitator. They would come out and meet me, and then they would go back and meet my stepdad, and it was kind of shuffled between the two of us, questions and answers. So all the questions I had were already presented to him and the answers were already given to me, but it's still something I needed in person. But so I wasn't expecting there wasn't going to be any surprises on the day.
Yes.
Through the 11 months, I had the chance to kind of come up with subsequent questions. And then towards the end, when it was getting towards the time of the meeting, there was a lot of preparation. I would go to the meeting area. I got to choose where we had it, and I wanted to have it on a neutral ground. There was a room at the probation office in Gateshead where there's 2 exit doors. It's a big room, and I got to go down and make sure I was comfortable there. There were separate rooms where we both could go to if we needed. And I knew all this, and I was very much in control of it all. And
you could arrange the furniture, you could have the chairs at the exact angle, which was important to you.
They asked me to put the chairs exactly how I wanted them, and actually when my stepdad did come in and put his chair right, they asked him to put it back because I'd asked for it specifically to be on an angle so it wasn't looking directly at me.
Right. So all that minute detail
it was really
prepared in advance. Did you arrive in the room first on the day of the meeting?
I wanted to. I had the choice. So yes, I went in first and then I was waiting.
And when he walked in, did you look at him?
I didn't look him in the eye. It took me a while, maybe about an hour or so, I think, during the meeting till I could actually look him in the eye. But I did obviously glance at him and got quite a shock at how different he appeared physically.
In what way?
Just very much, obviously older, but more, a lot weaker than he had been.
What did you ask him?
I had a lot of questions. The main ones were, why did he come to our family? Did he come to our family because there were children there? Or, you know, was it intentional, premeditated abuse? And why me as well? Did he do anything else to anyone else? You know, I wanted to make sure no one else had been hurt as well, the same way as me.
And what did he say to you?
He said he would be totally truthful because now he had nothing to hide. And it wasn't anything that was premeditated. It was just, I was the youngest child. I was the most available and vulnerable, which is why it was me.
How were you feeling as you were hearing him say this to you?
It was kind of like a reassurance, actually, because I thought I knew the answers to most of the questions, but and obviously I'd already had the written answers as well. So I don't know, I just felt like I had lots of information that I hadn't had before, and I felt quite powerful.
Did you?
Yeah.
And did you, how long did it last?
It was about 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours.
Did you have breaks?
I had breaks.
Okay. But did you feel in control for that whole period?
Yeah, it was made completely clear to me that I was in control. I could call a stop whenever I wanted, or, you know, I could just, all the time during the 11 months it was repeated, you can back out, you don't have to do this.
And I think, I'm right in saying at one point he said, I ruined your life, which you actually you pushed back on that, didn't you? What did you say?
Yeah, because I wanted him to know that he had had a massive impact on the early years of my life and subsequent years, but he hasn't ruined my life because I've got a great life now that I've built up myself. But I didn't want him to feel he had the control over making or breaking my life. I wanted to take that power back, which is something that I couldn't have done without the meeting.
And you offered to forgive him?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of wipe the slate clean, really, and just let it all go. So the meeting gave me a chance to do that as well.
How did he react to that?
He wasn't expecting for me to offer forgiveness, so I don't think he was ready to accept it. He got very emotional and had to leave. But then he said, I said that it didn't matter to me whether he accepted it. For me, it was, for me, letting go of it. It didn't matter. He could choose to do what he wants with it. But for me, it was having the power to be able to say that.
And you shook his hand and he apologised to you?
Yes, he apologised profusely, and he did say, yes, it's not a very big word, but it does mean an awful lot to me, because I needed to know that he was sorry, that he did feel bad for what he did, or, you know.
And you believed him?
I do, yes, yeah.
And when it was over, what was your overriding emotion?
I just felt really empowered, really.
So if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't gone through the preparation and had that meeting, what do you think you would be feeling now?
I would still have the same questions in my head. And I was just carrying all this anger and guilt and all this confusion around with me every day. And in my everyday life, it was manifesting itself in different ways. And now I feel I can just move past and really focus on living my life now.
Yeah. Wow. John, I mean, what do you think of what she's done?
It's an incredible story, and I think it illustrates so powerfully what the benefits of restorative justice can be. People who have had terrible things done to them and have suffered real harm from that, it's an opportunity for them to put that behind them, to have their own voice, to be able to have their say, and then to move on with their lives.
And how rare is it for somebody like Laura to meet the person who has abused them?
It is still rare, but we're hearing increasingly from the organisations that we work with that more cases like this are coming to them. We know that while restorative justice can be used for any crime, from very low-level crime and antisocial behaviour right through to the most serious crimes like the crime that Laura suffered, we know that the sort of crimes that are coming before the criminal justice system are changing. We know that many more sexual crimes are now being reported to the police, up 41% last year. So we know that more cases like this are coming to the criminal justice system, and we hope that all victims of crime, whatever crime they've experienced, will be able to access restorative justice.
Tracy on Twitter, I mean, there are many of these. This is one that reflects many of these messages. Laura, thank you for stepping forward and speaking out. Young girls need to hear real stories like this so they can look out for the signs. And a number of people saying that you are really inspirational for making the decision to waive your right to anonymity and to talk about this openly.
Yeah, I'm not special, but I feel like because I struggled to put into words what happened to me when I was younger, and it wasn't ever talked about. And I think the way forward is to have an open dialogue with everyone and children as well about the dangers and what signs to look out for.
I mean, just some more now. Jessica on Twitter, how brave is Laura? Waiving her right to anonymity shows her strength in knowing that she was never to blame. She is a strong woman. Mel tweets, kudos to this young woman for speaking out, so brave, and it goes on. I mean, you'll see them there. Your physical health now?
I'm very healthy now. My eating disorders in remission has been for actually about 2 years. The eating disorder's been in remission, and I was still having mental health difficulties up until I was in the services until January this year. So actually since the meeting I've been out of all the health services, so that's a really good indication as well that things have helped a lot.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, John. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the programme. And if you'd like to get in touch about Laura's story, do email victoria@bbc.co.uk or send us a message on Facebook or Twitter. Coming up a little later on in the programme, relatives of those killed